Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight's executive leadership call. We're so honored to have our incredible CEO, Chuck Funke, with us tonight. Again, I appreciate your joining us. First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers are with everyone right now. Stay safe, and we just hope that we can pass this together. I am your host, Corey Beagley, and again, thanks for joining tonight's call. Guys, it is the 17th of March, and it is 7 p.m., so let's go ahead and get started. I have a couple of announcements, and then I want to get things right over to our incredible CEO. As you have heard, and if you haven't heard, we have a couple of cancellations that have gone out recently. Our Ascent trip and our Diamond Summit trips have been canceled. But I just want to give a huge shout out to not only our top 10 qualifiers for the Ascent trip that you see listed here, and these are our top 10 North America qualifiers, but I just want to give a shout out to everyone that is qualified and everyone that worked so hard to qualify. This is our biggest incentive that we have throughout the year. It's our longest one. We recognize how much hard work has gone into this. And so I just want to make sure that everyone knows, we know that has not gone unnoticed. Chuck's gonna mention it here in a little bit, but we've had record weeks recently amongst everything that's been going on. So again, we just want to appreciate you. Again, not only the top 10 qualifiers, but everyone that qualified and worked so hard. A notification went out that if you qualified for the 2020 trip, you will qualify for the 2021 trip. And there will be some additional announcements and updates to follow. Same thing with our Diamond Summit first reward level qualifiers and the second reward level for that. Highlighting here the first reward level for our Diamond Summit. Some of our incredible leaders out there, again, working so hard to build your teams, to help others with their legacies and their goals. And so a big shout out to everyone that qualified for our Diamond Summit incentive. Again, while we're not going to Rome this year, and first and foremost, health and just the recovery and getting past this as a community and as a group. But again, well done to those who did qualify and worked so hard. I just personally, I hope I can get that through here tonight, that while the trip is not happening this year, we just want to give a huge shout out to those that qualified. And the third recent cancellation is our North America Envision Conference. This one was tough. We put so much time and work into it, not just here at corporate, but everyone in the field to promote this, all the regional events, everything that's pointed towards Envision. While we are not going to gather together, we are working on getting some of the content out. We had an incredible lineup of speakers. We will have news and updates to follow here shortly. So again, while these three incredible trips and conferences are not happening, we will be having updates here shortly with some alternative things that we'll be doing to continue to share and make the world a better place. And that's just it. I'm so grateful to be a part of the ASEA community. Now more than ever, we have an incredible opportunity to make the world a better place. And we just highly recommend, as you follow the counsel of our incredible leaders, that make the world a better place by following the national and state mandates and obviously compliance. Our incredible executive team put together this video. It's available on YouTube, Vimeo, and IamASEA.com. If you haven't seen this yet, we'd encourage you to go watch it. While tough times are currently happening, there's still some very exciting things happening here at ASEA that they discuss in this video. So that is the announcements that I have. And again, thank you so much for being on tonight's call. We're so honored to have our incredible CEO with us, Chuck Funke, who I will turn the time over to now. Chuck, you are now the host. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Corey, I can see you just fine. How are you?
Doing really well. How are you?
I am doing great. I appreciate that introduction, and certainly appreciate all of you taking time to be with us tonight under what has to be some of the most interesting circumstances that any of us have ever found ourselves in. Speaking for myself, I can tell you that I can't think of a time where we have dealt with something on such a global scale as we are going through right now. I'll talk about the business in a few minutes, but that's almost a side note to the message I want to send of our deep concern for each and every one of you. We would have you know that not a day goes by, not an hour goes by that we are not thinking about you, your families, your businesses, the impact that this is having on individuals, on families, on the economy. And to be honest with you, none of us really know how the story ends. And that can sometimes be disconcerting. It can be unnerving, but thus is the nature of life. And it's ours to make the most of it and to work our way through it. But actually, more importantly, to help other people get through it as well. We just want you to know that we are monitoring the situation around the world. I realize that this is a North America call, but you all know that we are open in 33 countries around the world, and every government is dealing with this in various ways. We've seen many of our colleagues and our friends in different parts of the world impacted by this much more severely. And we still don't know what's to come, but we'll move forward always, and we are very optimistic that this will pass. We know it will pass. While events like this are unusual, they are not unprecedented. We tend to look at the lens of history through our own experiences and our own time on this earth, but things like this have happened before. And while they're terribly difficult things to go through, we have to keep in mind that they always do pass. And this will pass as well. And in some odd sense, we will probably all be the better for it. It will make us stronger. Things that we maybe have taken for granted, we will grow to appreciate more. And I think we should always look for the bright side in these kinds of situations. But just know that I mentioned in the video that Corey just referenced, that video was actually just shot in one take. It was just us talking from the heart. It wasn't scripted. It was just important for us to get a message out about what's going on and to let everyone know that we're aware and concerned about each one of you. I mentioned in that video that we're hearing a lot about this concept of social distancing. And I actually think that that's not the right term for it. I think it's, we ought to think of it more as physical distancing, because being social and sociality is more important right now than it's ever been. And what I mean by that is that technology allows us to stay in touch with each other in ways that we've never been able to do before. So I would encourage all of you to make sure that while you maybe have to keep your physical distance and limit the number of people that you're in contact with from day to day, that you don't distance yourself socially from your teams, from your families, because they will need you more than they ever have before, and they will draw on your strengths in ways that you actually don't even understand or appreciate. So stay close to people during this time. Interestingly enough, we have not, shifting a little bit more towards the business side of things, we have not really experienced any disruptions in our business, which is an extraordinary thing in these times as we monitor different news outlets and see the impact that this coronavirus is having on businesses, on the economy. We are in a very, very fortunate situation. As Corey mentioned, we've actually had record sales weeks just recently. The business is healthy. And in spite of some of the complete shutdowns in some of the markets around the world, one thing that we are seeing that is holding consistent is delivery of the product. And we don't know that that's going to always be the case. We know that there have been some disruptions in delivery in Northern Italy recently, also in some of our will call centers. But surprisingly, the e-commerce aspect of the economy continues to actually run quite well. And we're fortunate that we are largely an e-commerce business, and that our business is done from a processing standpoint is done online. And we continue to monitor that. And again, we've seen very little disruption. On Friday of last week, we did communicate to all of the employees here that, of course, we've been telling people that if you're ill, to please do not come to work. We are not requiring people to take paid time off. We are paying people as if they were at work. And if they're ill, we certainly don't. We want them to be home and be getting better. And also any employees who have been affected by any situation, in fact, all of the schools in Utah are essentially closed. They've moved to a virtual classroom setting, and that's required a number of employees to have children at home during the day, and we're allowing them, anybody whose circumstances dictate it, are working from home. And about half of our associate support team is working from home. And well before this ever happened, we had put into play scenarios like this. You always have a disaster recovery plan. You never know exactly what the situation is going to be. But a long time before this ever occurred, before we even had heard of the coronavirus, we had put steps in place to allow the vast majority of our employees to work remotely. And that is something that you're seeing happening right now. Our production continues to remain on schedule. Our production team is up and running. We are manufacturing product just like we always are. We are in a fortunate situation that we control our supply chain on our redox products. We don't rely on manufacturers from overseas. And so we have safety stock on all of our key supplies and materials. So we don't anticipate for the foreseeable future any disruptions in that. Also, I would just mention that a lot of people have asked about the financial condition of the company given the recent stock market fluctuations. And all of our financial assets as a company are held in cash. So we're not impacted at all by the volatility in the stock market. So from a financial standpoint, we are very, very healthy. From a business standpoint, we are doing very well. But having said all that, again, that's secondary to the situation that we know many of our associates find themselves in. We are working very closely with our regional heads, with all of the departments around the company on a really hour-by-hour basis, if not more often. We are literally monitoring this situation really somebody is minute to minute in terms of what's happening. So just know that the company is well and doing fine. And we want each one of you to be well and to be doing fine. And that's what our primary concern is. If there's anything that we can do, or if you are aware of any situation that you think we can be of assistance in, we would certainly want you to let us know that. So thank you for all that you do to contribute to the position that we're in. We're only able to be stable as we are because of your tremendous efforts and the work that you do, and your willingness to be out and share our incredible products with people. And we're also it's great to have a product that everybody needs. And that's another thing that I think will see us through this. We remain completely optimistic. We meet often to talk about the current situation, and again, we don't know what tomorrow holds, but we're optimistic that this too will pass, and we'll come out on the other side of it stronger and better as a result of it. So again, just wanted to share that with you. I'd like to share a message with you. Maybe some of you will find some value in it. Maybe some of you won't, but at least it'll distract you maybe from the boredom of being locked up at home or not able to go anywhere. Let me just share a presentation with you. It'll take a few minutes. If you'll just bear with me, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and turn off my video so you don't have to look at me. But I'd like to share a presentation about something that you're going to wonder, what on earth does that have to do with anything about what we're experiencing as a world today. As many, if any of you know me at all, you know that I am a fan of history. I love to read history, and I always believe that history can teach us a great deal about the future. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about tonight, is something that happened around 50 years ago, actually just a little over 50 years ago. And I will tie it together because really the theme of our time together tonight is leading through adversity. And that's what we're doing right now. All of us in various capacities are leading through adversity. And I want to talk to you about something that, and share with you, there's some text in this presentation that I'm going to share with you and read. There may be a little bit much, but I think it's important. There's a thing called the Kranz dictum. I actually have this hanging up on the wall in my office, and I read it from time to time. There's some other folks here in the office that also have it up. And when we talk about the Kranz dictum, we're talking about a gentleman by the name of Gene Kranz. And just to go back a little bit in history, those of you who may even remember back very early 1960s, the space program was just getting underway, and there were different levels of the space program. The first program was called the Mercury program. And what the Mercury program was designed to do was to actually just simply see if humans could survive in space. That's all they were trying to do. Single astronauts would be launched into space in a Mercury spacecraft. And finally, they got up to 34 hours in space. So that was the first program. Then they graduated to what was known as the Gemini program. And the Gemini program was designed to practice space rendezvous and extravehicular activity, meaning they had to be able to disconnect one piece of a spacecraft and connect it to the other. And that's how they ultimately were able to get the various pieces that they needed to get to the moon up into outer space. And that was what Gemini was. And that ran from 1965 to 1966. Then, of course, you're all familiar with the Apollo program. It was the Apollo program that started in 1967 and ran all the way through to 1972, which was the last year that humans actually walked on the face of the moon. Apollo 11, which was the inaugural flight to the moon, happened on July 20th of 1969. So just last year was the 50th anniversary of people walking on the moon. But that's actually not what I want to talk to you about. I don't want to talk to you about Apollo 11. I want to talk to you about what was potentially one of the greatest failures in the space program, and what was a devastating tragedy that happened and how they recovered from it. Gene Kranz, as I mentioned earlier, he served as NASA's flight director for the Gemini and Apollo programs, and was the flight director for the Apollo 11 moon landing, which was the first one, and then the Apollo 13 mission. He was very, very well respected. I'm going to show you a clip from the movie Apollo 13, which many of you have probably seen, which will give you a little indication about his character. So just watch this with us.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module.
5 filters on the limb, which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc,
You're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges. The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs, handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee going, too, someone.
Guys, what I love about that scene is that is the Apollo 13 mission. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, about 50 some odd hours into the takeoff, and Apollo 13 was actually on launched April 11th, 1970, so less than a year after the first moon landing. About 50 some odd hours into the mission, there was an oxygen tank explosion. And they realized immediately that the astronauts were in danger and were certainly not going to land on the moon. And the entire mission became getting the astronauts back safely to Earth. And what you saw right there in that film of Apollo 13 was a situation that was unanticipated as they were trying to figure out a way to get the astronauts back safely to Earth, given the fact that the spacecraft was impaired and was really at a critical situation. So again, not to bore you to death, but just so you have some context, prior to liftoff of a spacecraft, the missions are controlled from the Launch Control Center located at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Merritt Island, Florida. Some of you maybe visited there. The responsibility for the booster and the spacecraft remains with the Launch Control Center until the booster actually clears the launch tower. So once the rocket, the spacecraft clears the launch tower, the responsibility is handed over to what is known as NASA's Mission Control Center, which is at the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston. That's why, Tom Hanks famously says in the movie Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem, because he's talking to the Mission Control Center, who essentially has responsibility for the mission from the time it clears the ground until it returns back to Earth. There's a picture of what the building would have looked like when Gene Kranz actually would have worked there. As I mentioned, the Apollo program was a program that was designed to actually get us to the moon. And the astronauts that were originally selected to go to the moon, we all know who the first person who stepped on the moon was. It was Neil Armstrong and then Buzz Aldrin right after him. That's not who was initially intended to go to the moon first. It was these 3 gentlemen that you see right here. It was Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. And there was an absolute tragedy that happened to these 3 gentlemen because all of them died when there was a flash fire swept through the Apollo 1 command module during a launch rehearsal test, well before they ever set out for the moon. In a test run, they died in just a tragic way. And it set the program back more than 18 months, and extensive redesigns had to be done before NASA could send anybody else into space. The result of that tragedy led to a review board that listed just a really, really damning set of circumstances, failures, and recommendations for future spacecraft designs to consider. There were a number of hearings that were held over this tragedy. And as you can see there, the US Senate conducted its own investigation and hearings and published recommendations while saying NASA's failures to report its problems with Apollo was, quote, an unquestionably serious dereliction. So you have to put this again in the context that President Kennedy had promised that by the end of the decade, by the end of the 60s, we would put a person on the moon. So there was certainly a lot of pressure on NASA to come through. And with the tragedy of the Apollo 1 astronauts, It set them back a serious way, not to mention the just terrible tragedy of the loss of life. Gene Kranz addressed his branch and flight control team on the Monday morning following that disaster. It was January 30, 1967, which became known as the Kranz dictum. That's what I referred to earlier, and it's what I said I actually have hanging on my wall. And this is the actual words that he spoke to his team the Monday morning after these 3 astronauts perished in this fire. And it's a little long, but I'm going to read it to you. And it starts by saying, "Spaceflight will never tolerate carelessness, incapacity, and neglect. Somewhere, somehow, we screwed up. It could have been in design, build, or test. Whatever it was, we should have caught it. We were too gung-ho about the schedule, and we locked out all of the problems we saw each day in our work. Every element of the program was in trouble, and so were we." Before I move on with his statement, the thing that strikes me about this is that he took responsibility for what happened. He did not sugarcoat it, and he simply stated it as it was, is that we screwed up. Don't know exactly where it was or what it was, but we should have caught it. He goes on to say, "The simulators were not working. Mission control was behind in virtually every area, and the flight and test procedures changed daily. Nothing we did had any shelf life. Not one of us stood up and said, 'Damn it, stop.'" What he's doing here is he's identifying a situation and giving his team permission to be open and honest when they see flaws in the system or things that aren't working right, to be able to stand up and say, "We need to reevaluate this, or we need to rethink this." And that's a very important component in leadership, is in endearing in individuals a trust that they can speak their mind. If people are afraid to speak their mind around you, then you are always going to be surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear, and eventually that will blow up in your face, because you'll be confronted with the reality that isn't real. And that's why he essentially here is giving people permission to say, we need to stop and slow down because we're not ready. He goes on to say, "I don't know what Thompson's committee will find as the cause, but I know what I find. We are the cause. We were not ready. We did not do our job. We were rolling the dice, hoping that things would come together by launch day, when in our hearts we knew it would take a miracle. We were pushing the schedule and betting that the Cape would slip before we did. From this day forward, flight control will be known by 2 words, tough and competent. Tough means we are forever accountable for what we do or what we fail to do. We will never again compromise our responsibilities. Every time we walk into mission control, we will know what we stand for. Competent means we will never take anything for granted. We will never be found short in our knowledge and in our skills. Mission control will be perfect. When you leave this meeting today, you will go to your office, and the first thing you will do there is to write tough and competent on your blackboards. It will never be erased. Each day when you enter the room, these words will remind you of the price paid by Grissom, White, and Chaffee. These words are the price of admission to the ranks of mission control." So that has been now memorialized as the Kranz dictum. Let me share with you now another video clip from the movie Apollo 13 that shows the leadership style that I so much admire about Gene Kranz.
Quiet down, people. Quiet down. Quiet down. Let's stay cool, people. Procedures, I need another computer up in the RTCC. I want everybody to alert your support teams. Wake up anybody you need, get them in here. Let's work the problem, people. Let's not make things worse by guessing.
Confirmed. We're seeing the same, 13.
Can we review our status here, Si? Let's look at this thing from a standpoint of status. What have we got on the spacecraft that's good?
I'll get back to you, Gene.
Gene, I'm wondering what the Grumman guys think about this.
We can't make any guarantees. We designed the LEM to land on the moon.
Not fire the engine out there for course correction.
Well, unfortunately, we're not landing on the moon, are we? I don't care what anything was designed to do. I care about what it can do.
There's an interesting statement that he makes in that clip that you will sometimes hear around the corporate office, which is sometimes when everything around us seems to be going wrong, we have to step back and ask the question, what do we have on the spacecraft that's good? Meaning, what is working? And I think that's an interesting question for us today in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. What do we have on the spacecraft that's good? And I will tell you that we have a lot. The business is up and running. The business continues to run. The business is healthy. For the most part, our associates have not been overly impacted by this phenomenon that's occurring right now. There is a lot of good that we should be remembering. And while there will be difficulties ahead, no doubt, it's up to us to navigate through those. Gene Kranz said that no American had ever been lost in space, and not one was going to be lost under his watch. But asking ourselves from time to time, metaphorically, what do we have on the spacecraft that's good? Sometimes meaning focusing on the positive can sometimes put into perspective the difficulties that may be happening around us. And I would like to just call out as we wrap up here, we talk a lot about our mission and our vision as an organization. Hopefully most of you know it and are familiar with it. If not, it's right there in the upper left-hand corner of this document. What we don't talk as much about are our core values. And as we look at the situation that we find ourselves in, as we're dealing with uncertainty, we're dealing with situations that we've never had to deal with before. Our routines have been disrupted. Our way of living has to some degree been changed. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, there's two things I'd like to highlight for you that are the core values of ASEA. You could call this the ASEA dictum, if you will, not the Kranz dictum. But we have two core values, which are the governing values that we live by as an organization. And it's resolve and collaboration. And if I would tell you how we as an organization, meaning all of us will get through the coming days ahead, it's going to be because of these two core values right here. And let me just highlight them for you. The first one is resolve. It's that we recognize the complexities and challenges of a global business, so we confront those challenges head on. We're committed to solving difficult issues, even when this requires making hard decisions. Well, if ever there was a time for resolve, it's now. Our resolve may be being tested, but as we say here, we recognize the complexities and challenges of a global business. We recognize and acknowledge the complexities of what we're going through right now and the impact that that is having on people. That core value is a value that we could use in our individual lives as well. The second one is collaboration. And we seek to leverage expertise from all areas of the organization. Our greatest success comes when we combine our strengths to solve issues and achieve our objectives together. And with resolve and with collaboration and with a lot of hard work, we will make our way through the difficult situation that we find ourselves in. I am incredibly optimistic that we will find ourselves a way through the situations that are confronting us right now. We are incredibly blessed to be with a company that is in a position that is not dealing with the kinds of issues that so many other companies are dealing with right now. We, by virtue of holding meetings around the world, travel, we have a lot of touch and conversation with other industries. There are entire industries right now that are on the brink of collapse because of what's happening right now. And there will be more to come if this situation doesn't resolve itself in a relatively short period of time. And we don't find ourselves in that situation. And for that, we should all be very, very grateful. Whatever hardship we may be going through right now, whatever difficulty, if we're depressed, if we feel like we're unsettled, if we're anxious, if we're nervous, I will tell you that none of the decisions that we're making as an organization are out of panic or out of anxiety. They're out of social responsibility and doing the right thing by our associates and by the organization. We're not panicked. We are not, while we're concerned for the people, we're not necessarily concerned for the health of the business. And so many other organizations can't say that right now. So again, what do we have on the spacecraft that's good? We have a lot. We have a lot to be tremendously thankful for. We have a lot that we should realize that we should come together on. And just in closing, just let me share with you again, our thoughts are with you. There are people working around the clock to ensure that your businesses keep going. And I don't want to overemphasize the business aspect of this because that's one part of it. Your well-being and that of your family is, again, our top priority. And we're just genuinely grateful for you and for the situation that we find ourselves in because we have a lot of things that are good with this organization. So be well, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of yourselves emotionally. We're all in this together. We look forward to seeing you again very soon, and we will, even though we've had to cancel a number of events that we look forward to every year. The sun will shine again, the rains will go away, and before we know, we'll be back to doing things that traditionally we've done in the past, and we look forward to those days. Thank you for your time tonight, and the best wishes to all of you right now. Thank you so much.